From Mothers to Monsters? The Shocking Reality of U.S. Women's Prisons. The sound of heavy metal doors echoed through the long hallway. Clang, slam, lock. Debra Milke took a deep breath as a guard led her through the Arizona State Prison. The cold air smelled like bleach and fear. Inmates stared through bars, some shouting, some whispering, as she passed. She had never been in a place like this before. She wasn't a criminal, she was a mother. But here she was, in a prison jumpsuit, her name replaced with a number, labeled by the world as a monster. The officer pointed to her cell. "This is where you'll stay," he said. Debra looked inside. The cell was small, gray, and silent. The metal bed had no pillow, only a thin sheet. On the wall, someone had scratched a sentence into the paint. "In here, time never moves." That was the moment it hit her. She might die here. She had been sentenced to death for killing her own son. But Debra didn't kill anyone. She sat on the bed and pressed her hands to her face. Her heart raced as she replayed the words from court. Guilty, first-degree murder. The courtroom had been silent after that. No one spoke. People just stared at her like she was a monster in a cage. Reporters outside shouted questions she couldn't answer. How could a mother do this? But the truth was, she didn't. The night before her son Christopher was found dead, everything had been normal. Christopher was only 4 years old, a happy little boy who loved toy cars and bedtime stories. Debra tucked him in that night like always, kissed his forehead and whispered, "Good night, baby. Mommy loves you." She had no idea that would be the last time she'd ever see him alive. The next morning, her roommate James Stiers said he wanted to take Christopher to the mall to see Santa Claus. Debra trusted him. He was her friend, and Christopher liked him. Years later, Debra got a call that changed her life forever. James said Christopher had gone missing. She rushed to the police station, shaking and crying, begging for help. But instead of comfort, she was met with suspicion. Detectives didn't believe her tears. They said she was too calm. They said her eyes looked cold. One detective, Armando Saldet, claimed she confessed to the crime. But there was no recording, no witness, no written confession, just his word. And his word would send her to death row. When the judge read her sentence, death by lethal injection, Debra's knees buckled. She wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Her parents cried in the back of the courtroom. Her world shattered. Now, sitting in her prison cell, she thought about her son every second. She whispered to herself, "I didn't kill my baby. I didn't kill my baby." Days turned into months. Months turned into years. In prison, Debra saw things most people couldn't imagine. Fights in the cafeteria, guards yelling, women crying for hours in the dark, and sometimes silence so heavy it felt like the air was too thick to breathe. At night, she could hear other women talking, mothers like her, serving life sentences. Some were guilty, some swore they weren't. All of them shared the same thing. The world had stopped believing them. Years passed. Her hair turned gray. Her eyes lost their shine. Yet deep inside, one thing never changed: her hope. Debra kept writing letters, begging lawyers to review her case. She told anyone who would listen, the detective lied, he made it up. But few believed her. After all, she was the woman the newspapers called the cold-blooded Christmas killer. Then, one day, everything changed. In 2009, after almost 20 years behind bars, a new attorney found shocking information. Detective Saldet, the same man who claimed Debra confessed, had a loathing history of misconduct. He had lied in other cases. He had even been accused of making up confessions before. But none of that was revealed during Debra's trial. For the first time in years, there was light in the dark. Her lawyers filed an appeal, and slowly, truth began to rise. When Debra heard that the case was being reopened, she cried for hours. It felt unreal. like the walls were finally cracking. But the system moved slowly. It took 4 more years of fighting before something finally happened. In 2013, after 23 years in prison, a federal court ruled that Debra Milke's conviction was unjust. The court said her trial had been unfair because of the detective's lies and the state's failure to reveal his record. When the guard came to her cell that day and said, "Milke, pack your things," Debra froze. "Why?" she asked. The guard smiled slightly. "You're going home." Tears streamed down her face. She packed her few belongings, a Bible, a photo of her son, and a small notebook full of letters she'd written to him. As she stepped out of the prison gates, the sun felt like a dream. Reporters surrounded her, cameras flashing. She didn't speak. She just looked at the sky and whispered, "I'm free." But the truth was, she wasn't really free. Not yet. Because even though she walked out of prison, she was still carrying the weight of a question the world wouldn't stop asking. If Debra Milke didn't kill her son, then who did? The first night of freedom felt unreal. Debra stood in her sister's small apartment, staring at the mirror. The face looking back didn't feel like hers anymore. Pale skin, tired eyes, hair streaked with gray. 23 years. That's how long she had been trapped behind bars for something she didn't do. She touched her own reflection and whispered, "Who am I now?" Her sister hugged her tightly. "You're home, Debra," she said softly. But Debra knew the truth. She wasn't really home. She had lost everything, her child, her youth, and her place in the world. The next morning, reporters were waiting outside. Flashes of cameras filled the street as she stepped out. "Do you have anything to say?" one shouted. "Did you do it?" another asked. Debra's lips trembled. She wanted to scream, "I was innocent," but the noise was too loud. Instead, she just said quietly, "I want justice, for my son, and for myself." As she walked away, the weight of the world followed her. Even though the court had thrown out her conviction, she wasn't fully cleared yet. The state of Arizona still had the right to retry her. She could go back to prison at any time if prosecutors decided to reopen the case. That fear never left her. At night, she'd wake up sweating from nightmares, hearing the echo of metal doors slamming, hearing her name being called over the prison intercom. Sometimes she'd even imagine her son's voice. "Mommy, where are you?" She'd whisper back into the darkness, "I'm still here, baby. I'm still here." Days turned into months as Debra waited for a final decision. Her lawyers worked nonstop, pushing the court to dismiss the case for good. Each time she went back to court, she held her breath, hoping this would finally be over. But the prosecutor refused to let go easily. He told the media that Debra was still guilty, that there was enough evidence to convict her again. The headlines came back. Milke still a suspect. Mother from hell. It was like being trapped in a cage without bars. One afternoon, a journalist named Sarah Whitman knocked on her door. Sarah had followed Debra's case for years and didn't believe she was guilty. "Debra," she said gently, "I want to tell your story the right way." For the first time, someone wanted to listen, not accuse. Debra sat with her for hours, describing everything, from the day her son was born to the day she was sentenced to die. She talked about the lies, the fear, the loneliness, and the women she met in prison. Many of them were mothers too, some guilty, some not, but all broken by the same system. Sarah's voice trembled as she asked, "What kept you alive in there?" Debra smiled faintly. "Hope," she said, "and my son. I talked to him every night, even when no one believed me." When Sarah's article was published, it shocked people across the U.S. Readers couldn't believe a woman had spent 23 years on death row based only on a detective's word. Public support grew. For the first time, America started to question how easily someone could lose their life to the justice system, especially women and mothers. But the fight wasn't over. In March 2015, after years of legal back and forth, the Arizona Court of Appeals made the final ruling. It dismissed the case permanently. Debra could never be tried again. The nightmare was finally, legally, over. Yet, as she left the courthouse that day, Debra didn't smile. She stood in the sunlight, surrounded by cameras again, and said something that silenced everyone. "They took my life, and no one will be punished for it." She was right. The detective who lied was never charged. The prosecutors who hid evidence kept their jobs. No apology, no justice, just silence. For most people, the story could have ended there, a tragic but closed case. But not for Debra. She wanted people to know what life was really like inside the prison walls, especially for women labeled as monsters. She began speaking publicly about what she saw. Women who were mothers, sisters, daughters, many of them struggling with abuse, poverty, or mental illness before they ever committed a crime. She described how guards mocked women, how hope faded behind steel bars, and how the world forgot them. Her words hit hard. Some of those women, she said, just needed help, not hate. As she spoke, more former inmates came forward with their own stories. They talked about being mistreated, ignored, or silenced, their pain hidden behind the word prisoner. It wasn't just about guilt or innocence anymore. It was about humanity. Debra's story became a mirror, showing America a truth it didn't want to face. That sometimes justice wasn't about right or wrong. It was about who had the power to be believed. Years later, Debra moved away from Arizona, hoping to live quietly. But the past still haunted her. Every Christmas, she placed a small toy car, her son's favorite, on her table. She lit a candle and whispered, "I love you, Christopher. I hope you know Mommy never gave up." The camera of life slowly faded from that moment, the flicker of the candle reflecting in her eyes. But as the screen darkens, one question still lingers in every viewer's mind. If this could happen to one mother, how many more women are sitting behind bars right now for something they didn't do? It was early morning in Tucson, Arizona. The sun was rising over the desert, quiet, golden, and still. Debra sat on her porch, a cup of coffee in her hands, watching the light touch the sky. It had been years since she walked out of prison, but every sunrise still felt like a miracle. Some days she'd wake up startled, still expecting to hear the sound of prison doors slamming. Other days, she'd just sit and breathe, reminding herself that she was finally free. But freedom had a cost. She couldn't get a job easily. People still Googled her name, saw the headlines, and judged her. Neighbors whispered. Some even crossed the street when they saw her coming. The label murderer had stuck, even after the truth came out. Once, a woman in the grocery store recognized her and muttered under her breath, "That's her, the one who killed her son." Debra turned, looked the woman in the eyes, and said quietly, "No, I'm the one they lied about." But no amount of truth could erase the years she lost. 23 birthdays, 23 Christmases, 23 years without her son's laughter. Still, Debra didn't let bitterness win. Instead, she found a new purpose, fighting for others like her. She began volunteering for groups that helped wrongfully convicted women. When she spoke to them, she didn't sound like a victim. She sounded like someone who had seen hell and made it out. Her voice was calm, steady, but filled with pain that only survivors understand. "I was called a monster," she said in one speech. "But monsters don't cry themselves to sleep every night missing their children. Monsters don't spend decades begging for the truth to come out. I was never a monster. I was a mother." The audience went silent. Some cried. Some stood and clapped. In that moment, Debra wasn't just telling her story. She was telling the story of thousands of women across America. Women locked away, not just behind bars, but behind judgment. women labeled, forgotten, and feared instead of being understood. She spoke about mental illness, about addiction, about trauma, the things society often ignores. She told reporters, "We need to stop asking what these women did wrong and start asking what went wrong in their lives before they ever ended up there." Her message spread. Documentaries were made. Universities invited her to talk about justice and reform. And slowly, the narrative began to change. People started to see the truth, that many women in prison weren't monsters. They were mothers, daughters, and survivors of a system that too often breaks the innocent and forgets the broken. But even with her new purpose, Debra still carried one wound that would never heal: losing Christopher. Every night, she still wrote to him in her journal, as if he could read her words from another world. "My dearest boy," one entry read, "I wish I could hold you one more time. I wish you could see that your mommy never stopped fighting. They tried to destroy me, but love is stronger than their lies." Her handwriting shook, but her spirit didn't. She had learned something powerful, something she wished the world would understand. That behind every prison wall, there are stories of people the world gave you. John's stories of mothers who once sang lullabies and baked birthday cakes. Stories of women who were never monsters, only human. Years later, when she was interviewed for a national news program, the reporter asked her one final question. "After everything you've been through, do you forgive them?" Debra paused. The camera zoomed in. Her eyes filled with quiet strength. "I forgive them," she said slowly. "But I will never forget what they did, because forgetting means it could happen again, and I won't let that happen to another mother." The screen fades to black. The sound of echoing prison doors fades into silence. Then her final words return, spoken over soft, haunting music. "They called me a monster, but I was always just a mother, trying to survive a system that forgot what justice really means." If this story moved you, don't let it stop here. Like this video to help more people hear Debra's truth. Subscribe to our channel for more real American crime stories that reveal the hidden side of justice. And if you believe that no one should ever lose their life for a lie, then share this story so her voice and the voices of others like her are never silenced again. Stay tuned for more true stories that America can't afford to forget, only here on Unmasking Dark Truths.